What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today's Friday, which means it's time to talk through my 10 starts and stats for Week 4 of the fantasy football season. This is where I give you guys 10 players I'm higher on than consensus, and a lot of these guys are bargain bin types, right? Wide receiver 44, tight end 19. Guys where if you're getting ravaged by injuries right now, right? Devontae Adams is out. We got a lot of really weird last-minute injury news. We're dealing with like Kenneth Walker. Is he going to be in and out? We're dealing with everything across the board. Everything's on the table. So I'm here to help you guys out in a week that is kind of a trying time for all of us. So we're going to start a little bit more luxurious here, but I promise we will get deeper as we go. In my first start and stat of the week, of course, if you enjoy, leave a like and subscribe, all of that good stuff. But we're going to talk through Stefon Diggs. Oh, and I did want to say, report card for last week. We do this every single week. Look, we are diving deep. I know that this is Stefon Diggs, my wide receiver 12, but we usually dive deep here. We got Christian Kirk right last week. He was a wide receiver 2 finish. Odunze, wide receiver 1 finish. Zach Moss was an RB1. Chuba Hubbard was an RB1. And Brenton Strange was the tight end 8 last week. So not bad. 5 out of 10 when we're going as deep as we go in these videos isn't bad. Now, with Stefon Diggs, we have a spot here. He is going to be at home versus the Jaguars in a get-right spot for the Texans, who just got humiliated against the Vikings. Now, the stats here, I have him as the wide receiver 12 versus Jacksonville. That is 7 spots higher than consensus. So I wanted to show him because consensus has him as like wide receiver 19. I have him as like a must-start wide receiver 1 this week, and here is why. The Jaguars are allowing 252.3 passing yards per game to their opponents. That is the 3rd worst and the 4th most adjusted fantasy points to wide receivers via J.J. Zacharyson. He does a late-round podcast. He is amazing. He has an adjusted fantasy points allowed metric that's kind of just adjusting for the strength of your opponent, right? If you hold the Patriots to 0 fantasy points, does that mean that your secondary is all that great? Probably not. So it adjusts for the talent that you're going up against. So we have a weak Jaguar secondary, and the Jaguars run man coverage a league high 53.1% of the time, despite what has been an awful secondary. This sets up great for Nico Collins, who's graded as a top 5 wide receiver versus man coverage this year per PFF, but he is dealing with a hamstring injury, which could allow Stefon Diggs to be the first read. And actually, Stefon Diggs, according to Fantasy Points, has a higher first read target share than Nico Collins. So we have a bad Jaguar secondary. They, for some reason, despite being a bad secondary, run a lot of man coverage, which sounds counterintuitive. And then Diggs, although he's been subpar versus man this year, over his last 2 years has had a better yards per out run versus man than zone, and he's tracking to get back to an 80-plus open score on ESPN for the first time since 2022. So ESPN's open score has usually been a pretty good resource of just how often is a player getting open? Are they creating separation? They have catch ratings, they have overall, they have yak, but in terms of year-over-year stickiness, open score has been the best. And Stefon Diggs last year kind of fell off a little bit. Small sample, of course, right? Just 3 weeks here, but he's back on track to an 80-plus open score, which is what we need from him, especially if we want him to beat man coverage this week. And if Diggs still got it, this is the time to show us versus man coverage from DBs he should be beating. With Tank Dell out and Nico Collins on the injury report, it's time for Stefon Diggs to show up big. So I really like Stefon Diggs this week. I will say as well, make sure you check him out over on the Pick'em lobby on Underdog. I have a link in the description and the comment section down below. When you use promo code RON, they'll match your first deposit up to $1,000. We have special pick'ems going on. Look, like there's just promos across the board. You got college football. You got MLB WNBA boosts happening every week. You got profit boosts tomorrow for Carson Beck, for Arch Manning, I believe. Yeah, this is for week 4. I was going to say Arch Manning. I thought that was last week, but no, that's this week. You get profit boost for week 4. There's a million things going on. I also know that they sent out an email on accident to like their entire user base. So look in your email inbox if you're like already a user on Underdog, and there should be something there for you as well involving profit boost. Now, moving on from this, our next player, a little bit deeper here, Cam Akers. He's my RB24 versus Jacksonville this week. That's 3 spots higher than consensus. And I know Mixon got a practice in, but I'm not all that certain Mixon's going to play here. All right, this is a tweet from Jeff Mueller. I've gotten 1,000 comments saying Joe Mixon practiced today. Not convinced one limited practice on a Friday will be enough for him to play Sunday, but we'll see. So, of course, this all hinges on Joe Mixon missing time, but it seems like he's on track to miss time or be very, very limited. We also have Dameon Pierce. He didn't practice, and then he also just got ruled out as I clicked record for this video. And with Cam Akers, Mixon only got 1 practice in this week. Pierce, 0 listed out. Still a very good chance Cam Akers is the lead back in a light matchup. Akers was a disappointment last week, but this was in an unlikely 7-34 loss to the favorites at home, to the Vikings. My bad. Not an ideal environment. The Texans follow this up with being 6-point favorites at home versus the Jaguars. Even though 4 running backs logged snaps for the Texans, Cam Akers still took on 82% of the rush attempts. So, yes, was J.J. Taylor involved? Was Dario Ogunbowale involved? Sure, but the game got away from them. Dario Ogunbowale is going to be the passing down back, but as 6-point favorites at home versus the Jaguars, we should see a lot more Cam Akers. Cam Akers should dominate the rush attempts again versus a Jaguars defense that is 31st in run stop win rate and 24th in EPA per rush. They're also allowing the 5th most adjusted points to running backs on the season, according to J.J. Zacharyson. So it's a really good matchup in a week where you could be down bad at the running back position. Maybe somebody even dropped Cam Akers after last week, thinking that Joe Mixon would be back. Cam Akers, to me, again, in RB2. He did get in the end zone last week. It wasn't quite a hit for what we're looking for. He was in the RB30s last week, but I like him to get back on track as an RB2 this week. Then we have Najee Harris. Similar deal. He's been on this list. This is his second time. His first time wasn't great. We're going back to the well. He is my RB19 Najee Harris on the road versus the Colts. 1 spot ahead of consensus. So not a crazy amount ahead of consensus, but I do just want to give you the confidence. If you have Najee Harris, I know that you're probably frustrated. Don't sit him. This is the time to play him because the Colts are a run funnel. Their opponents are passing the ball minus 12.6% under expectation, the lowest in the NFL, and have run 74.7 plays per game, highest in the NFL. There will be a lot of play volume and run game for the Steelers. It's perfect for Najee Harris, who has the 6th most carries among running backs with 55. They haven't been efficient carries, but the Colts have allowed 179 rushing yards per game, league worst, and the 7th most adjusted fantasy points to running backs from J.J. Zacharyson again. On top of rushing volume versus soft defense, Najee Harris should be more involved in the pass game without Jaylen Warren. For me, Najee Harris is a top 20 option this week. We could see him get in the end zone. The Colts defense is brutal right now. I think that they have injuries to Kenny Moore. They have injuries to Kwity Paye, the Michigan edge rusher they drafted a couple years ago. Of course, DeForest Buckner's out. Like, this defense is just absolutely decimated. I think like Zaire Franklin's like the only dude I can really name on this defense. I'm trying to think, like maybe Grover Stewart's another one, but it is a depleted unit. Really, really bad. So it should be an environment where the Colts like get themselves into these games where they almost invite the other team to get on the field a ton, especially with how bad Richardson has been. We'll see how Richardson is against the Steelers defense, but this should be a game, another 20 carries for Najee Harris, which is what he's been getting, but it should be efficient 20 carries this game. Maybe some reception upside. Maybe he scores a touchdown. Like I said, I do like Najee. And then this is our last one that's like kind of obvious, but I just want to give you the confidence to start Jayden Reed, right? Because we've had Jordan Love, and it's Jordan Love injured, and we've had Malik Willis in the mix, and it's kind of made things murky, but I really like Jayden Reed this week. He's my wide receiver 21 at home versus Minnesota. That is 1 spot ahead of consensus. This is why. The Vikings have a top 5 EPA per play defense, but teams have passed versus them at the 10th highest rate over expectation, pass rate over expectation, PROE. They've also allowed 239.3 passing yards per game, the 7th highest, and 590 yards to wide receivers, the 2nd highest. So the Vikings have a good defense, but they kind of invite chaos in a way, and they invite big plays, and they invite their opponents to pass the ball as well, which we'll see with Jordan Love. And the Vikings have allowed an explosive play on 10.2% of passes, the 4th highest in the NFL. The perfect matchup for Jayden Reed, who already has 4 catches of 20-plus yards, the 4th most in the NFL. I want to say as well, he might even have like a rush that's 20-plus yards as well. So he's an explosive play waiting to happen, and the Vikings, although they've been a good overall defense, have been prone to big plays, and if someone's going to make a big play, it's going to be Jayden Reed. Now, the Vikings also run zone coverage 77.8% of the time, the 5th highest in the NFL. Another area for Jayden Reed to exploit, as he leads all wide receivers with a 5.62 yards per out run versus zone, the 3rd highest PFF grade versus zone as well. So we have a Vikings defense that runs zone 5th highest amount, and Jayden Reed, 5.62 yards per out run on the sample that he's running routes on is bonkers versus zone coverage. Of course, they haven't been very pass heavy with Malik Willis, but he is destroying zone right now. The other guys that are like in the top tier for versus zone are like high 3 of yards per out runs, like 3.98, 3.9. So he's a monster. Fire up Jayden Reed as a wide receiver 2 with Jordan Love on track to play. Disregard this entire section if Love can't go. Like I said, if Jordan Love plays, you're getting Jaden Reed in your lineup is the bottom line. Now, on the other side of that game, we have Jordan Addison. He is my wide receiver 39 this week on the road versus Green Bay in the same game environment, 37 spots higher than consensus. Now, maybe some of the experts on Fantasy Pros has him as somebody that's not going to play this week, but we just got news that not only is he ready to go, but he's off the injury report entirely. He's not questionable. He's not probable. He is off the injury report entirely, and he is ready to go, which is absolutely massive stuff. Now, for me, he's a boom-bust wide receiver 3/flex play this week at wide receiver 39 in a thriving Vikings passing offense. This has been one of the best passing offenses in the NFL. Sam Darnold's been making big plays, and the Packers have allowed the 10th most adjusted fantasy points to wide receivers, along with the 5th highest rate of explosive pass plays. So they're actually kind of similar to the Vikings, where they've been a good defense, but they've invited a lot of big plays, and that's something that Jordan Addison does. Jordan Addison last year as a true rookie was tied for the 19th most receptions of 20-plus yards with 15. This was more than Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jaden Reed, and Devontae Adams last year. So it's boom-bust, but if anybody is going to get a 40-plus yard touchdown on broken coverage versus this Packers team, it's going to be Jordan Addison. And I think in a week where everybody's looking for whatever options they can, I think you could do a lot worse than Jordan Addison. Now, we're going to go back to the well on Rome Odunze. He came through for us in the clutch last week. He is my wide receiver 28 this week at home versus the Rams, +5 over consensus. And I'll just say it straight up, I don't really care if Keenan Allen plays. Keenan Allen is dealing with some kind of heel issue. If he comes in, he's going to be limited, maybe in a decoy role. And even if not, I think it's such a good matchup, you just have to play Rome Odunze here. The Rams are allowing the second most EPA per pass play, which EPA is just expected points added. It's just it's just like yards and touchdowns, but kind of taking into account your field position, the efficiency, what it's kind of doing for your overall score in the game, all of that. And a league worst 9 yards per attempt. Allowing 9 yards per attempt is pitiful. The next worst is Washington at 7.7 yards per attempt. They also are allowing the second most fantasy points to wide receivers straight up. The Rams are allowing an explosive pass 9.6% of the time. That's the 26th worst in the league, matching up great for Rome Odunze's 18.3 yard 8-out. So, really bad pass defense. They're really bad at letting up a big play, which is what Rome Odunze has been living off of. And then 135 of Rome Odunze's 156 receiving yards have come against zone coverage, leading the Bears in yards per out run versus zone coverage. The Rams run zone coverage 79.3% of the time, the 4th highest rate in the NFL. We talked about this last week. Rome Odunze can beat all coverages. Right now, he's been thriving versus zone in the NFL. DJ Moore last year, he had a monster year. I love DJ Moore, but he's very interesting where he had like a 3.8 yards per out run versus zone last year, and he had a 3.8 yards per out run versus man last year, DJ Moore, and then like a 1.8 yards per out run versus zone, which is really crazy for a guy who had 1,400 receiving yards. So he is much better versus man. Of course, there's going to be plays where the Rams run man versus DJ Moore, and of course, DJ Moore in any matchup can go crazy, but this does set up with another zone coverage team for Rome Odunze here, and this is also a great environment. The Bears are projected for the 15th most points on the week and pass at the 5th highest rate in the league. Both the Rams and Bears are top 10 in pace of play, so there should be a lot of pass attempts, there should be a lot of plays in this game. So for me, Odunze is a high-end wide receiver 3 this week. Now on the other side of this game, this is where we get really deep, fellas. This guy's going to be on your waivers. If you lost Devontae Adams, if you lost anybody, you lost Evan Ingram, you need somebody. I don't know why I said Evan Ingram. Like maybe you're flexing Evan Ingram for some reason. I don't know. If you need a flex and you really got to dig deep, I do like Tutu Atwell. Tutu Atwell is my wide receiver 46. That's 12 spots higher than consensus. He's on the road versus Chicago in this game we just talked about with Rome Odunze. Tutu Atwell went from running a route on 31% of dropbacks in week 2 to 83% in week 3. He also had 5 targets, 4 catches, 93 yards last week. Now, the Bears are a stingy defense, allowing the 6th least fantasy points to wide receivers, but he's set up well for Atwell running zone 77.5% of the time, the 7th highest rate. I butchered that. The Bears are a stingy defense. They allow the 6th least fantasy points to wide receivers, but they set up well for Atwell because they run zone a lot of the time. Atwell is the only Rams wide receiver not named Cooper Kupp with 100 or more yards versus zone coverage this season. His 3.93 yards per out run versus zone bests even Kupp's 3.34 yards per out run versus zone. If Atwell can get back to 80% plus of the routes and find the soft spots in this Bears zone defense, he could be a great flex option this week. So we already saw him get 4 catches, 93 yards last week. He should be able to exploit the Chicago Bears zone coverage a little bit. and, give you a nice, like, I think we could see like 4 or 5 catches, like 60, 70, 80 yards, maybe a touchdown, maybe a rush attempt too. He gets used in that way as well. So Tutu Atwell, I think you could do a lot worse than having to flex him. Then we have Jacoby Myers. And I do want to give a big disclaimer, okay? What we just talked about, Tutu Atwell, he is my wide receiver 46. I have 45 wide receivers ranked ahead of him. You can find that over on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart in the description and the comment section down below. I have my weekly rankings all there. They'll all be updated on Sunday. I will say, like, when you look at it, I don't know if Tutu Atwell will be the wide receiver 46, but by Sunday morning, he will be. I just want to say this very clearly. I have 45 receivers ranked ahead of Tutu Atwell, so I am not telling you to, bench your Xavier Worthy for Tutu Atwell. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm not telling you to bench your Zach Moss for Tutu Atwell. I'm saying if you are in a pinch, if you are down horrendous, Tutu Atwell is a fine option. That's what I'm trying to say here. And similar story with Jacoby Myers. He is my wide receiver 38 versus Cleveland at home, plus 10 spots over consensus. We just got news that the Raiders are ruling out Davante Adams with a hamstring injury. So, yes, Davante Adams is out. This is going to lead to more targets across the entire receiver room. And, of course, Brock Bowers is there, right? Brock Bowers should be the leader in targets, but he is much better suited for zone. He has 3+ yards per out run versus zone, just 0.62 yards per out run versus man, and should see more defensive attention without Adams. The Browns run man coverage at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. So you have Brock Bowers here where he's really good. I love him, but if he's going to get double covered all game and have, like, the best defenders on him the entire time, and they're going to run man coverage a ton as well, that's not really a great matchup for Brock Bowers. So I will say I'd be hesitant. I mean, if you have Brock Bowers, you're starting. But I'd be hesitant to be like, he's the wide receiver, he's the tight end 1 by a mile this week and it's going to be amazing. I think it kind of offsets a little bit. Now, with Jacoby Myers, over his career, he hasn't been much different versus zone or man over the last 2 seasons, but he should be a great underneath option in a game that has some shootout potential. Both teams, the Browns and the Raiders, are top 12 in pace of play and top 5 in pass rate over expectation, which means there should be a lot of pass attempts, there should be a lot of plays. Will there be a lot of points? Maybe, but there's no way of knowing with these 2 quarterbacks. But despite Cleveland being a stingy secondary, Myers should be a PPR floor wide receiver 3/4. So I think that he's fine. He's a fine flex play. He's going to be in the mix here. With the Davante Adams injury, he should have, I'd say like a floor of like 5 receptions for like 50 yards. That's what I'm thinking with Jacoby Myers. Maybe he gets a touchdown. I don't know. We'll see. I will be very curious to see a very good defense in the Browns, how they're going to deal with Jacoby Myers versus Brock Bowers. I can't see a world where one of their top corners like Denzel Ward or who else do they got, man? I know that they've sort of I think it was like Greg Newsome was the other one. I don't know if he's still on the team, but I'll be very, very curious to see how that goes because I doubt they put a corner on Bowers, but they absolutely could. After that, we have another bargain bin receiver, my wide receiver 44 at home versus Washington, Greg Dortch, 9 spots ahead of consensus here. And this is really because Trey McBride is ruled out with a concussion here. Greg Dortch should pick up the slack. This is actually a really great stat from Rich Rebar. Dortch has run a route on 93.3% of the team dropbacks with McBride off the field, matching Harrison with a team-high 28.6% of the targets. Washington has allowed slot receivers to catch 80% of their targets, 27th in the NFL, with a 16% touchdown rate, 29th in the NFL. So Washington is awful against the slot. They allow a lot of touchdowns against the slot. And when McBride's not on the field, Greg Dortch fills in that role with a 28.6% target share. And this is a smash spot for anybody involved in this game. This game has the highest over-under of the week at 50 points, Washington versus the Cardinals. Arizona has the highest team total at 27, and Washington is allowing the most points to wide receivers in fantasy football. So Greg Dortch, it's not sexy. It's not going to be pretty, but he could very much give you like 7 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. And I think that some of us are so down bad this week that could be just fine. Now, our bargain bin tight end of the week here is going to be Elijah Higgins. Now, he was really fun coming out of school. He actually came out as a wide receiver, but he transitioned to tight end. So I imagine he's probably put on weight since he, measured in at the combine, but he's kind of like a poor man's Evan Ingram here, where he's like 6'3", 235 pounds, 4.5 speed. He's explosive. He's fast. that's all you're really looking for a tight end, especially one that's a receiving tight end, right? Like a guy who played wide receiver in college and is 6'3", 235 pounds will not be blocking on pass plays. I know that they have Tip Raymond over there. He is going to be the one blocking on pass plays. I would not be starting him anywhere. Now, of course, Elijah Higgins is my tight end 19. 12 spots higher than consensus, but still, if guys like, I don't know, if like Komet's on your waivers, if Ertz is on your waivers, Hunter Henry, even Noah Fant, any of those guys, fire them up. But if you're in a league, if you're in a 12-man league and like half of your league is rostering 2 tight ends, you might have to look to Elijah Higgins, right? Like let's say you have Evan Ingram, somebody has Brenton Strange on their team or something. I think you can do a lot worse than Elijah Higgins. He is first in line for the routes Trey McBridley's behind. He's available everywhere in the best game environment of the weekend versus an awful pass defense. So he's kind of the same reason that you're playing Greg Dortch. It's just a environment where points will get scored. Elijah Higgins is explosive. He's fast. He should fill in that role. And if you can just get like 9 PPR points from your tight end, you're looking good. And I think Elijah Higgins can do that this week. Now, of course, that is going to do it for us today. We'll be posting this on Friday. I'm going to be live around 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We're going to do, right now, Underdog has out, where is it? They have the Resurrection out, which is pretty fun. It's a $10 contest, and it's a fantasy draft for weeks 6 through 17. So it's kind of like a restart, resurrection is what they call it, on the entire season. Should be really fun. Use promo code Ron if you want to check it out. Hop on Underdog, all that good stuff. They'll match your deposit up to $1,000, and you can draft with me tonight. Anyways, appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, I surround my body like